Good morning, good afternoon, good evening everyone. This is the Average Joe and today I'm going to take you through a warm-up for your runs. So this warm-up is essentially for anyone who is new to running and doesn't really know what to do in terms of a warm-up before they go running. I'm going to take you through each step, explain everything in great detail, slow it down for you so you get a full understanding of what you're actually doing during that warm-up. Now I will say this warm-up is the warm-up that I use for my runs. It doesn't have everything in it. There's going to be some exercises that you might know and I'm not showcasing them. Feel free to add those in, that's completely fine. So we are going to start with the lower part of our legs, that is the calf muscle and the soleus muscle, and the muscles around the ankle essentially. What we're going to start off with is a simple calf stretch, but we're going to add a little bit of a pulse or a pump to them. As you can see on the video here, I'm leaning forward, getting a good stretch on my calf, but I'm alternating each leg for about 1 second each time. That is ensuring that the calf muscle is getting nice and warmed up through a dynamic type of stretch, not a static stretch. So to achieve that calf stretch feeling, what we want to do is make sure that the leg that we're stretching is as straight as possible behind our body. And we do this by locking our knee so that it is straight, and you should feel that stretch on that lower part of your leg. Whilst doing this stretch, we also want to make sure that our heel touches the ground. We don't want any heel lift off because that's not getting the full stretch in. So things to remember is to keep your leg straight by locking that knee and then keeping your heel on the ground when you are in that stretching position. Now I do recommend doing these calf pulses around 20 times on each leg. I do 30 times just because my calf muscles are a bit tighter than usual. But essentially do these type of stretches until your muscles feel nice and warmed up. Now moving on to the soleus muscle, that is positioned at the bottom area of our lower leg, so closer to the Achilles heel. And essentially with this one, it's actually a copy of the calf stretch that we just did, but we are going to bend our stretching leg by the knee. So to figure out how to do this, get into that initial calf stretch that I showed earlier, and then simply, instead of locking the knee, just bend it. You should feel a more intense stretch towards the bottom of that lower leg to the bottom of the calf muscle. And then with this, we want to do the same thing as we did with the calf stretch. We want to do a little bit of a pump. So hold it for 1 second, switch leg, hold it for 1 second, and keep alternating. And again, like that calf muscle stretch, we want to make sure our heel is touching the ground when we stretch that leg. I recommend doing these soleus stretches around 20 times on each leg again, just to make sure they're nice and warmed up. Now I will quickly add, you don't need to do both of these calf exercises one after the other. You can go to a different muscle group on your legs and then come back because it might be a bit too intense. But I am going to keep this in order of muscle groups, so we're staying with the calves for now. And the next stretch is a calf raise, but with a rocker at the bottom. So a calf raise is simply just going up onto the balls of your feet. What I recommend is just testing that out a bit so you know what a calf raise feels like. Once you've nailed that calf raise, you can then add the rocker, which essentially is you go up on a calf raise, you then go back down to your starting position, but as soon as those heels touch the ground, you want to lift the front of your feet off the ground as if you were kind of pulling up something with your toes. This is a very good warm-up for the calves, the ankles, the anterior tib muscle, and definitely one you want to put into your warm-up. And with these calf raises with that rocker, I only do about 12. Now 12 might be too much for you if you're a beginner runner, that's completely fine. Just do a few until your ankles and your calf muscles are nice and warmed up. Right, we are now done with our calves. We're going to move on to our quads, which is the front part of our upper leg. And I can think of no better exercise than the forward lunge. So how do we do this lunge? So we want to stand in normal neutral position, and then we're going to put our foot out and then put it in the floor in front of us, and then we don't want to bend forward as if we're leaning with our back forward. We actually want to bend at the hips and just go straight down. So as you can see from the video here, we put our leg forward until we hit the ground in front of us, and then we bend our hips and our knees. And as you can see, when we're going down, we're going straight down. We're not kind of leaning forward whilst we go down. That is the most important part of this. And a good indication to see if you're doing this properly is watch the knee on the leg that's out in front of you. We don't want the knee to travel forward when it's already there. We want it to kind of just stay put whilst we go down. Now your knee will travel forward a little bit, but we don't want it to travel forward too much and have our back kind of leaning forward kind of encouraging that knee to move forward. Now, when trying to get used to doing a lunge, I would recommend having your back knee hit the ground and then just rest it there for a bit, just so you know what that feels like. And then once you're ready, you want to push off with your front leg back up into your starting position. This might take a bit of getting used to, but practice makes perfect. Now for these lunges, I recommend doing around 10 on each leg. If you're a beginner runner, that might be too many, so of course, scale it to your experience. If it's the first time you're doing it, don't do that many. Maybe do 5 on each leg, just to make sure your quads are nice and warmed up. Now we're going to move on from the quads and we're going to hit our hamstrings at the back of the top of our leg. And we're going to do a classic leg swing. It's very popular, you've probably seen a lot of runners do it. What you want to do is hold onto a pole or a desk, anything that you can balance on, and then with the opposite leg you want to swing back and forth. Now, to begin with, I recommend keeping the knee just a little bit bent. It doesn't really matter, that's not the focus for the first few leg swings, because we just want the hamstring getting used to what this leg swing is going to feel like, and then we can think about straightening that leg out. So here we go, we do a leg swing, do around 5, I do around 5, and then I think about extending that leg out to make sure it's straighter, and I do that by locking the knee again like we did with that calf exercise at the beginning. Now you will feel a more intense stretch when you do lock out that knee, or lock it out as much as you can whilst you're doing these leg swings. That's great, that is a good stretch on that hamstring and kind of feeding into the calf as well. So we've got the leg straightened out on the leg swing, but we also want to focus on the back portion of that leg swing, because that back portion of that leg swing is actually stretching our hip flexor as well. So we want to make sure we get a good stretch there. So that's why I recommend driving as much as you can up in front of you to get that stretch on the hamstring, but then also driving as much as you can backwards whilst keeping your hips neutral. You don't want to kind of lean forward whilst you're leaning backwards, because you're not going to get that hip flexor stretch. You want to make sure that your hips are staying where they are and staying put. A good tip to make sure that is happening with your hips is to activate your glutes and then swing your leg back, and you should feel that hip flexor stretching. And with these leg swings, I recommend about 10 to 15 on each leg. Now we're done with those leg swings, but we actually need to do another version of a leg swing, which is a lateral movement, side to side. And what you want to do is get a chair or a desk, or just lean forward and touch the wall. That's completely fine. You can lean forward for this one because we are actually focused on the groin muscles and the sides of the hamstring. And quite similar to the original leg swing, we want to swing from side to side. Now you will find that your leg will be able to swing out a lot, but not necessarily in a lot, just because it's crossing the body and you've got a whole nother leg in the way. That's completely fine. What we want to feel is that groin muscle stretching when our leg swings out, and then we know we are stretching properly. And much like the normal leg swings, we want to do these 10 to 15 times on each leg. Okay, up next in the warm-up is opening and closing the gate. This really works the groin muscles. So what we want to do is lift our knee in front of us and then rotate it 90 degrees so that it's to our side. And then we bring our leg back down to the original position. You should really feel a stretch on your groin muscle. What we want to do is open the gate 3 times on each side, and then to close the gate, you just reverse that pattern. So you start with your leg out to your side, and then you reverse it so that your knee ends up in front of you, and then you go back down to the starting position. And we want to do those 3 times as well. Now we also want to stretch our glute medius. Now to do this, what we want to do is bring up our knee in front of us, then we want to rotate the bottom of our leg so that our foot, or our heel, is as close to our hip as possible. Now I definitely recommend using your hands here to assist you, as you can see in the video. If you use one of your hands to hold your knee up, and then use your other arm to pull the rest of your leg as close to your hip as possible. A very common problem with this one is when you are pulling your lower leg up to your opposite hip, your knee will tend to drift out. We want to stop that as much as possible, hence why we have our other arm holding our knee there. What we want is that knee staying as central as possible. We don't want that knee to drift out in any way. So it's good practice to just go slowly with this one and make sure that knee stays in front of you, and you should feel a stretch kind of around your glute muscle. I recommend doing 10 on each side. Of course, if you're new to this, scale it to what's comfortable for you. Next up in this warm-up, we have squats, and this is essentially good for all of our muscles in the leg. And the standard air squat is simply standing in the starting position, have your feet shoulder width apart, and then we're simply going to go down whilst bending at the knees and the hips. Now we're going to want to prioritize bending at the hips. and we're going to go down as far as possible really. We don't want our heels to kick up off the ground. That means we're going too far for our range of motion. It's also okay if your knees go a bit over your toes, that's completely fine. It's a normal function of the body, as long as it's not exaggerated. But if that was to happen, then your heels probably will be off the floor. And then when you're down there, you simply bring yourself back up to the starting position using your legs. Next up, we have a couple skips. Now, if you're a beginner runner, you don't necessarily need to put these skips into your warm-up. I just put them here just to get my legs even more ready. But really, the type of skips like A skip, B skip, C skip, they're usually used for sprinting. Now, to do an A skip, you want to start in the standing position and you want to bring your knee up. At this point, you also want to bring your toes up, pointing towards the ceiling. So if you just practice bringing your knee up first, get used to that, and then whilst your knee is up in the air, bring your toes up, and then practice doing that together. Once you're in that top position, knee is up, toes are up, then you want to push down to your starting position again. When you push down, there'll be a little hop, and that is essentially why it's called a skip. And then you just do the exact same on the other leg. Bring your knee up, bring your toes up, and then back down again. You're going to want to be landing on the balls of your feet. Now you can start by just doing this on the spot, but you're going to want to eventually try and move forward whilst doing the skips. Now you can see an example in this video here of what that looks like going forward whilst doing an A skip. Now with a B skip, it's essentially the same as an A skip, just the ending is a bit different. So you start with bringing your knee up again, pointing those toes up, but now instead of just going right back down to the starting position like an A skip does, you want to actually extend your leg out and then drag it back. And that drag back kind of feels like as if you were beside a treadmill and the treadmill was running and you were kind of rolling your leg along it and it would kind of fling your leg back. That's essentially what we want. Now for me, this is quite hard to show in slow motion, so I'll try and slow it down as much as possible so that you can see what's going on. Whilst doing this, you should feel the stretch in that hamstring again. And for these two types of skips, I would say do around 6 to 8 on each leg, or until you feel comfortable. And then to round off this warm-up, we've got the classics. We've got the high knees and the butt kicks. So with the high knees, you're essentially just jogging on the spot, but you want to put your hands out in front of you and then try and have your knees hit your hands. Now, you don't need to hit your hands. It's kind of just an indication of where your knees need to get to and how high they need to get to. You won't always hit them, that's completely fine. And with butt kicks, if you put your hands on your butt and essentially you're just jogging on the spot again, except you're bringing your heels to touch your hands. Now, in terms of mobility, that might not be possible for everyone. That's fine, as long as you feel kind of a stretch in your quad whilst you're doing it. Right, and that is the warm-up completed. If you do this warm-up before a run, you'll be completely ready for it. If you give this warm-up a go, let me know how it goes. And of course, if you think something should be added on, put it in the comments below. Thank you everyone ever so much for watching this video, and I'll see you next time.